To introduce Sankalp, Sankalp is trained as an architect and urban designer. He has been teaching at the Faculty of Architecture, CEPT University since 2008. He is interested in exploring the engagement of body with structural forces as a tool to experience architecture. He spent his early years with artisans and communities in the countryside of eastern part of Bihar, where he gained hands-on knowledge of working with diverse building materials in a socially charged setting. His current areas of research include development of details for an emerging aesthetic of coming together of industrial and natural materials and development of details for split bamboo. He has conducted several national level workshops on construction and has lectured widely on bamboo as a construction material. He is co-founder of Thumb Impressions, a collaborative practice involved in design and detailing with earth, bamboo, timber, and steel. He is a founding member of India Bamboo Forum, chaired by Honorable Member of Parliament Shri Suresh Prabhu, and a lifetime member of Bamboo Society of India. He is also advisor to Karigar Shala, an organization working for artisanal skill building for youth interested in non-formal education. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Nilosha. I'll give you a brief about this talk. So this talk was initiated was expressed by Anjali Dean to sort of talk on one of the projects which our office was doing. So I have focused on that project to a large extent, but I've also built up something before we discuss that project. Please feel to ask questions. Maybe that will lead to some different kind of discussions which may be relevant. This presentation, I have made it focusing on students because that would be a larger audience that would be here to listen today. The title of the talk is Body and Force, Adventure with the Hand in the Digital Age. We all know that we are in the digital age. I don't think there is any doubt about it. We are in the information age. We are completely dependent as well as manipulated by the kind of information that is floating in the digital media. Now, when these kinds of information floats into digital media, they are very fast and they are very informative and they're extremely powerful in the sense that it can expand to an exponential scale and can have both wide scale positive as well as sometimes difficult impact. Now, the title is Body and Force, an adventure with hand. Adventure with hand is basically targeting the people who are involved in the act of making, and for them who thinks that in spite of all kinds of information, it is important for the body to experience it in diverse ways. And body and force, because unless and until the body does not experience the force, it does not become the domain of the makers. It remains in other domains, certainly, but not in the domains of the makers. So makers, people who make, the bias is that they are the people who are experiencing force much actively, unlike people who are merely participant to it. I'm extremely grateful to both people who have helped me in academics and me this today representing our practice, Thumb Impressions. We have 4 partners, Manu, Milind, Nikhil, and myself. And then we have a very young team of Jugal, Sparsh, Varun, and then there are a group of artisans who have been helping us in sort of setting up of the practice and whatever we have developed so far. I'm extremely grateful to my academic colleagues, especially Neil, Vicky, Tasik, and all of them, who in the who have sustained or who have supported me in a sustained manner, and therefore, in a way, I represent both, and my intellectual growth has been witnessed by both. This is our team. Group of artisans, both carpenters as well as people who executed. All four of us and some young people who keep on coming and going. So we all know that we started with the hand, and then we developed simple machine. Then we mechanized it a little bit, and then we automated it. Automation means that you completely mechanize it instead of partial. And now we are witnessing a world where we talk about machine learning, fabrication technology, 3D printing, and all of those stuff. We know that all these machine learning data feeding are constantly used by digital platforms to feed on and sell stuff. So if you let's say check on your website, let's say something about a particular kind of a book, then you'll be flooded with similar kind of books. If you are going to check a product, let's say a green color shirt, then all what you will receive is all kinds of green stuff. So in a way, the digital media is trying to corner to sort of offer you a limited choice. It may appear that there is a remarkable amount of choice when it is connected to the question of finance. But it is extremely being relevant or extremely used in these days, these terms in architecture. And if you look at across the world, people have been working on developing tools and technology that those are automated and those can on their own sort of using robotics, construct it, 3D print it, etc., etc. So this is the background in which a populous country like India is trying to survive, and or let's say the people of this country is trying to survive. There are many kinds of in India. Today I received a mail from some student from the hostel trying to say that the washerman and they don't leave very clean. I mean, whoever is sort of involved in the hostel, and I don't know where they clean it, and we get skin disease and we get all kinds of issues. And isn't it old-fashioned to sort of wash your clothes with hands in an age where it is accessible, where washing machine is accessible? Well, I think what they pointed out is absolutely right. But the point is, what India are we talking about? So India is diverse in the sense that that as we move away from the hand, it seems that there is a great belief that it ends up into certain degree of empowerment or certain degree of entitlement. We're also working with a situation which is becoming much more useful in architecture. It's called augmented reality. You all know that there are apps which are available. You can put it in space, put your product, and you'll be able to visualize it, visualize on the street, etc. In some way, visually, it has made our life much easier. And it is believed that it is able to create an equivalent experience when that building or when that object will be placed there. Or certainly in a choice-making world, it may sometimes create difficulty of the choices, but sometimes from the perspective of the people who are providing it, it makes decision-making more measurable. We are doing 3D printing. Students are also doing research in DRT and other areas where they are trying to explore 3D printing and trying to look at this world. Now, 3D printing, you can look at it in a number of ways. If you look at the world of digital architecture, which we call as parametric architecture sometimes, you'll find a lot of smooth form, a lot of curvilinear form, and parametric forms are generally, they are mathematical equations, so to say, they're algorithmic, and as you change its geometrical parameter, the shape will change. And obviously, that is a sort of a way of deriving form, but there are also a lot of use of it, including simulating cities to find out how effective services can sort of move in, or how can we organize buildings, etc. Uh, the 3D printing, obviously, if it is raised to a certain level, it can be an extremely useful tool, because otherwise most of the construction happens using linear members. And if you want not to do 3D print, but to sort of cast it or fabricate non-linear members, it becomes extremely expensive. So in that sense, you can look at the potential of 3D printing as one of them. Parametric design is pretty much common today. In next 20 years, in next 15, 20 years, we will get generation of people who would be extremely efficient in sort of developing all this algorithm-based, or they would be very efficient in working with algorithm-based interface, etc. Unlike some of us, or maybe unlike some of you who may be listening to this talk, and so we are going to see a world of a dramatic change, and one can look at this dramatic change in a number of ways, but I think each generation of architect whom you know, most of them have embraced their time fully. And those are the people who are pretty much known, not the people who were working from the other side. And the people who are working from other side, you will know as dots in space, like Hassan Fathy, or some of these people whom you will know that. But the people who have embraced it are called the mainstream people, and you will be able to know them much more than any other people. Now, we can only argue. We cannot get into the discussion of wrong and right. We can get into a discussion of trying to critically look at it, what it offers to the world and to the human race at large. So if you look at a digital age, the body is sort of imagined now to be made out of surfaces, or they are imagined to be made out of atoms and molecules, etc., and connected geometrically and through some polylines, etc. So, you imagine and you imagine this to be an interconnected world. Now the question is, what happens to hand in this kind of a world? And I could not make anybody culprit when I'm putting this sort of image. So I thought that maybe I should put it, because any other person, if I put it, it will not. It will. This is not a great connotation. I'm trying to say that sedentary postures are privileges, and what is happening is that for whatever reasons could be lack of lot of people, working population, and therefore you automate it, or for example, desire to meditate and to enlighten, and in order to do that, you need to sit and think about meditation as work, and not making as work, and therefore you in a society you position some over the other in a way that one gets more precedent over the other, or one gets more privilege over the other, whereas in no way you can compare the knowledge of a carpenter is as profound as the knowledge of a professor sitting and sort of teaching some courses somewhere. So so sedentary postures are sort of privileged over the postures of making. And what happens in making is that it's a tiring job. It's very tiring. So one kind of one kind of a tiring job is play. So when we are kids, we love to play. Some of you and even elderly, many people love to sort of play. But playing in a disciplined manner requires a lot of efforts. Playing well requires a lot of effort. It requires a lot of discipline. It requires focus. It requires body to be trained in a particular way. And therefore, there is a knowledge that is built around it for its performance. Similarly, when our students, when a carpenter, everybody is trying to sort of make, the body and various muscles of the body engages in space, uses the tools, and the tools and the material engages to make a form. And there are various kinds of embodied knowledge that gets constructed out of it. I'll not get into what are those because we can get into it sequentially, but let me focus on the other parts of it. And so you see that slowly, once the body starts getting trained, it starts getting discipline of trying to work in a particular way. As we have a discipline of drawing, the makers or people who engage in the making gets into it. What happens is that because the whole body engages both intellectually as well as bodily, in a way, there is an extreme degree of focus which is required because there is no choice. When you are meditating, there is a choice. Your mind can go anywhere, etc. But when you are making, when we are cutting it, there is no choice but to focus on the act of what is being done. And in that sense, making has an extremely important place. And let me argue to say that it is that the place of making, the place of body is not going anywhere, because in the end, the body has to experience it, and the diversity of experience is extremely important for the body to work. So making is like dance. Like in sort of dance, you use the bodily gestures, you circle it, you make lines, you make planes, you make cones, you express through bodily expressions. Similarly, in the act of making, all these expression comes out. But culturally, we privilege the act of dancing more than the act of making. For whatever reasons, I'm not interested in sort of talking about right now in this space. So what we are interested here is the body, and therefore the experiencing hand. Okay, the hand that is engaged, the body that is that gets engaged in the act of making. Now, what is happening is that most of the time we are engaging ourselves in an orthogonal space. Now, when we are engaging ourselves in an orthogonal space, and we look at the grid that has been put there, what happens is that in reality, in this kind of an image, one is standing, we are standing on the ground, it is bearing something. Then there are walls or columns which are also landing itself onto the ground. And there is some spanning member which is resting on the wall. From the wall, it goes to the ground. So the spanning member, when it is orthogonal, it gives the impression that the space is orthogonal. And it also gives the impression that that these elements of the space can span itself linearly, and therefore we get these kind of spaces. Now there is a construction logic also to get these spaces, but we can discuss sometimes later. Now what happens when this grid gets distorted? Now once from the orthogonal grid, we go to a grid which starts getting distorted. The distortion in grid is change in shape. And change in shape is force. Okay. So for example, let's say you can use a linear member and you can get a hyperbolic paraboloid. Okay. but all curvature you cannot get using linear members. So for that, you have to curve the space in order to sort of get it. And therefore, the change in shape is force. And when we are moving in that space, in reality, when we are seeing these curves, we are seeing or we are participant to the change in space, change in shape that we are experiencing, and therefore therefore the force. So we are participating it, we are not directly experiencing it in the sense of weight and mass, etc. So which means that that the distortion in grid can give us any kind of space, and second, change in shape if it is force, and if it is not, let's say, fake for the time being, that it is not an impression of the curve, but in reality that is required to transfer force, that becomes a way to articulate. So I'll a little bit go further. So what we are doing is that, so if you look at if you read physics a little bit, I'm sure you know a little bit about brief history of time and black holes and all, which Hawkins wrote. Basically, from dark matter, you sort of see the universe expanding. But what is space? If you look at from the point of view of physics, space is occupied by matter. So space is matter and matter is space. If you start looking at from that point. So if an architect says that they are making space, most of the time what they mean is that they are making space by organizing the walls. Now, so what the architect says and what most of us say, that the masons will make the walls and the architects will make the space. Now the problem with this notion is that that again, and you can disagree with me historically, but what it does is that it privileges space, it privileges human labor over a sedentary abstract idea of the space. And in order to further argue this case, if you are saying that the wall is displacing material, the wall that the masons are making is displacing material, and they are making space so that the wall can be in that space, we are able to, but the language of the space remains same for both the agencies. Now, the space as an entity is abstract. Space is everywhere, and you can say that, but then somebody covers it like a cloth to make it appear like a space. So it's like the body and then shirt, if we are wearing it, it sort of covers it to sort of make it appear like space. Now, in order to make the space, there has to be some scientific principles that has to be followed. That comes out of the idea of the structure, because there are certain structural principles which are abstract, but which have been verified over a period of time, and that is why on that basis of the principle, on that basis of organizing material, that one is able to span or one is able to bear, etc. But it is the construction which realizes both, which means that neither the space nor the structure is complete without the knowledge of the makers, without being able to sort of make it. And in that sense, it is very important for both the agencies to properly know the construction. I mean, you look at history earlier, all these three agencies were one. We sort of started specializing it, sort of moving it separate, and then we don't want to talk to each other. And out of all the three, the construction people are the one whom we put it at the lowest level. The fact of the matter is that without the knowledge of the makers, there is neither space, there is no structure, because structure requires material in order to get its form and shape. And there is no visualization of structure if there is no material, because it is the material that gives the form. So in that sense, Uh, uh, Let me build up the case to sort of say that why making is extremely important and cannot be ignored in any way if we have to learn to articulate force. So our practice is to some extent an intersection between structure and space, and on the crossroads mediated by detailing. So I'll go to few slides, run it to give you some sense of it. So some of these projects are either done, yeah, are in the process of construction, but you can see the attention to detail in some or the other way. And right now, for example, this is a factory being made. You can see this a flitch section, but it was a large span. So you look at the steel curvature that has been worked out in between so that it doesn't bend, whereas the timber is sort of being used in order to stiffen in the lateral direction, as well as support a little bit of uh, timber. But at the same time, it gives warmth a little bit to otherwise an industrial cold space. Uh, there are a lot of things, but I'll just run through you quickly. If you look at this project which we are doing, you can see on the left side in the plan, there are columns which are closed. On the right side, there are columns which are spaced. So architecturally, once we get a program, what we are doing is we are trying to connect to structure and space, and we want to use, let's say, tectonics, or let's say the idea of the structure and the space together, so that it also creates a context for us to articulation. Because on the right side now, your spans increases. Now you'll have to think about beam depth and all of those. Now all these things leads to articulation. This is being made. You can see it. They have to change the sheet. This temporary, but it's still being made right now. If you look at the small residence which we were doing, if you look at the plan, most of the time we are fairly clear about our structural grid, and we position ourselves or position it in a way and do not really depend on the structure engineer. Of course, we heavily depend on their calculations, but we have a sense of how to make the structural patterns, both in space as well as on ground. Very small residence, 50 square meters around. So the staircase is mediated between the two spaces to make it large. It has got two common walls and two sides sort of opens. Obviously, you see it's fairly open. I'll not get into the conceptual idea a lot, but it just takes in light from one side. Now, what we also do is every time we have an opportunity, we want to express lightness. So we use, because it's a very tight sort of building, tight space, we use steel, and then we express steel in folding it. Now, once we are folding it, obviously, we are looking at it from a point of view of how much we can push it. So it is asymmetrically placed, as well as it uses two angle section, and then it sort of folds itself. But then it also uses the stone as an upper member to strengthen it, because if you look at if you look at the size of the width of the step, then it is not sufficient enough to give you enough strength. It has still got vibration. Once you put that stone member, then it becomes an active system and it stops the vibration. So you look at some of the space again. So both interior and furniture, everything has been done by us. We also engage in exhibition work. So this we did with workshopping, where we developed the exhibition pavilion, you can say that, or the stalls in bamboo. It was all made in our workshop in Surat. It was sort of transported and then it was assembled here. So it was made in parts and then assembled here. And if you observe very carefully, then you can see that there is no continuous member. You can see there are gaps there, which means that the vertical members are sort of helping it to transfer load. So in a way, each of these members are floating and there are steel rods which are trying to connect and then make it. And if you look at the posts, they are diagonally organized, because then it becomes a three-dimensional space that you are creating, because most of the time we are looking all around. We also do furniture. When we do furniture, of course, we are careful about the joinery, the slenderness of it, how to connect it, etc. This is some of the work which we we designed for Tata new showroom in Delhi. So some of the images of our furniture. Recently, AD also sort of published, you see the left one done by us. We are also executing works for others. So this is for Studio Basrai. We did this Alila View in Goa, this whole wall which we did in poured earth. We also do a lot of lime plaster. So you can see some of them. This we did for Faizan and Sami. Left one was again prefab worked out in our Surat workshop, and then it was assembled in Bombay. And the right one we are doing in Jaipur. I'll not show too much of it, but I'll have given you enough background, and I'll now move to the real project. So this project is basically a yogshala where people come to perform yoga. It's in Mulugu district right now. Mulugu has been that Mulugu area where this is has been declared as the World Heritage Site, the Ramappa Temple. The client is Jyoti. She's extremely passionate and an extremely knowledgeable lady, both in terms of education, but also in terms of organic farming, yoga, and wellness, and all of those. She was earlier running the school, and which was designed by Sudhir. It was quite a beautiful school, actually. But she wanted to move to the next level, and so she said that maybe she has worked enough in education. She wanted to work in holistic living, etc. And that is how she actually asked Sudhir to do it. So Sudhir actually gave us the project and said that maybe you guys can think about doing in bamboo, because she's trying to think about yoga place, and it has to be some place which is celebrated. So so this is how this project sort of got into being. This project is around 3,400 square feet, 78 feet span. This currently is the largest span in India. And we have used around 2007 bamboos in constructing it. So this is Sudhir, and this is the school which he had designed. And this school is slowly, we are doing adaptive reuse of it. So this was the first phase. Now we are moving to the second phase and developing more parts of it. So initially, so this is the site. Like we have got this Ramappa temple, and this part has been declared as the World Heritage Site, and it's beautiful surrounding. It's good amount of rainwater harvesting. They do it, and then they use it over a period of time for cultivation, especially paddy. Right? So this is what the school was like. So earlier, she had asked us to design for a separate building and let it treat like a jewel. So we had designed, we started designing for a separate building where we have this sense of yoga as something which gives you some degree of balance, and it elevates you in some way. It lightens us in sort of some way, and also it's a secular tradition. It's not a if you read Yoga Sutras, etc., Patanjali, and which is actually not a great, which is hardly a work of Patanjali. Yes. But anyway, so if you read it, you may realize that it is close to atheism or agnosticism. In no way it is close to the other side. So earlier we had done this like a pavilion, timber and steel columns or posts, and then we had this bamboo roof, and we had worked out details. If you see on the right, we had worked out how to end these kind of buildings, because that was something which we had been struggling, and Milind and myself actually have been working on this area for a long time to figure out what are the ways to end other than what we have been seeing. So earlier we had sort of done these things and these kind of articulations. We had done full-scale models, etc. And then it didn't happen because Jyoti thought that it is better to use the central space and really do a better job than to increase one more infrastructure. So after a long thinking, we said that okay, it's all right. Let's go ahead with it. And then Sudhir further put the complication to say that no, but you guys should not work in the shorter direction. You guys should work in the longer direction. So which means that obviously the challenge became tremendous, because again 78 feet spanning, etc. was a lot of a job, and we had not done it. And the only system we know worked was trusses or compression based system. But that was not something which we were very comfortable with. And I'll explain you sort of later. So this is what it looks like right now. These are some of the models of it. Okay, so this is what the plan is sort of like, and that's what the section is like. So it around you can around host 40 people to perform yoga, and if you need more, obviously you have to spill over. Now, what is important here in our mind, what was going on? One is that the fear that will we be able to span or not, and second, our discomfort with trusses, because one that we had not seen ample amount of trusses in nature. We had seen triangulation, but not very convincing example of trusses. Though the body has some amount, but many of it is thought like a tensegrity in that light. So so we were thinking about if yoga is about balance and if life is about expanding and contracting, like a tree and a seed. So the tree over a period of time decays, it gives seeds, and the seed again becomes the tree, and the life keeps on going like a cyclic process. So the continuity is of the process and not of the individual. And so we were thinking about that this experience of expansion and contraction in the space would be important. And if we look at it from the point of view of reversal of forces, so then what we worked out was a beam in which the deflection in the beam is being taken care by the curvilinear member, which is tension, but it is stiffened by triangulation in the plane. I'll show you later. And then you have got this compression member, which is below the beam, so that during extreme deflection, which is because of the creep in, let's say, 5-10 years, there are diagonal members which start from the top chord of the beam and rest on the compression member. So in a way, it is not compression member which is taking, it is neither the bending which is taking. It is this whole which is sort of working, and that's how we were trying to sort of interpret this idea. So it is changing both in this direction, in the shorter direction, as well as in the longer direction. So you look at the density of the member. If you start looking at it, it diagonally sort of comes down. So it sort of, every time you sort of make it sparse and make it dense. And similarly, it is happening in the other direction as well. So which is how it is getting manifested. So if you look at this, what we are calling as fish belly is at the back. And the compression member, which is an arch, which you are seeing here. And from the top chord of the fish belly, which you are seeing on the down, the members in compression are sort of getting connected onto the compression member. Okay, so it is trying to sort of rest itself diagonally onto the compression member. And that is how we were tactically able to span it without really getting into trusses. So if you look further, we'll show you. So you see, as you sort of, it rises and it falls. So it's both the sections, and our plan is oriented accordingly so that you can get it. If you look at this right image, this is the space of performance. You want to treat it sacred or whatever is up to you, but there are some experience that that requires a particular symbolic way of treatment to make it important apart from the design itself. So you know, so you are somebody who sort of comes there, performs yoga, and so you are in this space which has got which in one side is connected to the landscape, and the other three sides it has got the building which has got some amount of porosity, and then you have got these leakages on the other side a little bit, and those leakages are there, and this was the gate of the school, which we had to use it in order to make little larger space in the other direction. Now, visually, you start seeing and connecting depending on what orientation you are connecting to the other side. So I'll sort of show you further. So if you look at this now as an experience, if you're performing, so as you rise and you sort of bend, the space starts animating and changing itself because of the way this articulation works. So you see sparseness, you see denseness, you see something falling, and you see something rising. So the compression member rises, whereas the tension member falls when you are at the center. And morning, evening, and night, how will it come? Sort of, we're also trying to imagine that time, that what will happen as a space, because this space is from the other side and you are looking outside. Anand had done some structural analysis, so I'll not get into the details of it, but I'll show you how he has animated it. So it's around load bearing capacity by structural weight is around 1300 kilonewton per ton, which is quite significant. But he has animated this, which will give you visualization of what is happening. So this part is little weak because this is the part where the spanning direction changes, because we don't have members supporting members in the longer direction. So we had to support in the shorter direction. So that is how it becomes slightly complex and creates a weaker point here. So this is under extreme condition. What will happen? You can see it. Here's some of the force diagram that he has made. How much it takes in normal bending, shear, and deformation. How much it happens. Okay, now in order to do this project, we had to do a lot of R&D. So if you look at various parts of it, you look at these are the end conditions. The idea was that when that the end condition at least needs to have some articulation out of the wall to have an identity of its own, and then it touches the wall. So it creates that layer before it sort of touches the wall. This was particularly detailed by Manu and Jugal. Both of them sat to detail out these end conditions. So you see some of the details, how they are sort of worked out. And the idea was that, again, this may end up into endless customization of the joinery, because bamboo is not of same diameter everywhere. So we had to devise some middle ground where we can combine the industrial modes of producing and standardizing with how we work with hand. And that is why some of these details we developed, we did R&D, and then these are some of the details that we evolved out of our R&D. So obviously one of the important part of it is the saddle, because the saddle was worked out looking at the range of the diameter which is there for the bamboo that we were using, so that for some range the same diameter of the saddle works. Otherwise, what is going to happen is that we'll have to make we'll have to customize it, which was not possible and which is not the way the industrial modes can work. And you can see some of the some of the construction processes, and you can see some of the details. Now, well, it was important for us to verify shape. So we had to do it. We had to do it on site. So on site, these were made. Then it was put up there. It was tested. So people were standing. They were trying to test it. 11 persons stood up. Manu asked them to jump. All of those stuff happened. And then once we were convinced, then we said, okay, let's move ahead. But just to let you know that initially the lower member was only one, we added two. The upper member was only two, we added another two. So there were changes which we did also on site, because this was an experimental structure and there was no way in which somebody would have done a calculation. We have also did some deflection sort of measurements, etc. And then we cambered it so that it sort of works efficiently in bending. So some of the other details which we were trying. Of course, the coordination with office now these days happens through WhatsApp, etc. Sagar, right now he's doing TA-ship in CFP. He was there on site with Jugal for a sustained amount of time to get it executed. And Basant Bhai and his team executed it, and they are all from Dang. This is the site like, and you sort the bamboo based on diameter, and then each of them are sort of bundled, and based on where one is putting it, it is used. Kanu was there from Ahmedabad to sort of do fabrication work, because it was very difficult to get a precise working, because any imprecise work, what will happen is anyway you need to have a tolerance in bamboo, and it would have a cascading effect if you do it further, if there's further errors. So these are the construction sequence, you can see it. This is Jugal and Basant Bhai. Some of the site visits that we were doing. It was a fear that once scaffolding will go, what will happen? It worked. So this is what the outcome is there. So I'm in the final 2 minutes. This is Milind on the right. See, if you see, we have put these posts. We have particularly put it for wind road, because rest of the places were secured. That place needed to be secured. And also the idea, the discussion started happening that, are we designing a row for a space? And for a sustained amount of time, I was somewhere in between, but Milind was quite convinced that we were designing a space for which it is good that if we put the steel posts, and that's how it sort of started coming in. And then if you look at all of these, we further articulated it by putting some symbolic figure of the yoga to also connect to all kinds of people, because some people, it is useful to connect directly instead of abstract way. And some of this symbolic stuff in fabrications were used to exactly do that. So if you see on the right, this is the space. These are its end details. This is one test yoga training. This the space looks like. So after it was made, Jyoti said that it seems huge. So obviously it was huge, because that's why we were very scared to sort of get into it. And of course, these were also done, colors were done to also a little bit work out the scales. Some of them, not all of them, some of them. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you, Sankalp, for that insightful talk. I'd request the audience to please turn on their videos and we can have a discussion.
Yes, evening,
sir.
Sir, actually, I'm from EPSA. I've been following you from my third semester, actually, and yeah, I'm in final year right now. So you are a juror over here, continuously visiting us for our structural works, Hitesh sir works and all. So I've been following you since then. So I've followed this project particularly. So I'm not on social media per se. I don't use it for last 4 years right now. But I asked somebody to just borrow the images so that we can study your Yogshala structure. So I've prepared few of the drawings for myself for understanding it. So we had few doubts regarding the same, that why you required fish belly Fing Trust if you had compressional members supporting each other directly. What if the greed of the purline was that much only? So why do we require Fing Trust in that particular place first? And yes, we had few doubts that you sort of clarified right now in the presentation, that you added 4 codes later on in compression strut as compressional struts in Fing Truss, and 2 more tensional codes in Fing Truss itself. But why do we require Fing Truss over there? Because compressional members were supporting each other directly.
Well, see here the question is about, there are two kinds of. One, the question can be asked from the point of view of space. Another, the question can be asked about the point of view, why didn't you use trusses? You could have straight away said that you could have used trusses. And I'm sure that with trusses, you can do it. Even with compression member, you can do it. Here, the idea was, as I told you in the beginning, that it was a yoga hall, and we were trying to think about the fact that we didn't want to use trusses. Trusses are an extremely efficient system of spanning. You know that the triangle as a unit is extremely efficient, but the problem is that we didn't see enough example in nature, and it sort of most of the time creates a very static dimension. And because it was a yoga, and we wanted to articulate it also from the point of view of yoga as a way of balance, which requires opposing motion. And the opposing motion you can only show when you show, in this case, there's a tension and there is a compression. Okay, and so it is both structural, but at the same time conceptual take from the point of view of space. That is how we sort of did it, and not necessarily only from a point of view of structure, because from a point of view, if you argue only from a point of view of structure, you can do many things.
Yes.
So
certainly.
Yeah. So that's your response to the first one. The C, in reality, we wanted the top chord to be made out of hollow bamboo. Okay. But hollow bamboo was not available. So then we had to go for all the solid bamboo. And initially there was single layer, but we realized that we cannot take risk. So once, instead of 2, we added the second layer. But if you look at it, we have spaced it. We have not bundled it in a way, because we wanted to express by showing this porosity in the process of increasing inertia. And so they are not touching each other. Okay, so you will find that we have been very careful not to get into something which you'll find very common in bamboo construction is just to put one over another.
Yes.
Okay, so that's another very conscious decision that we do.
Actually, when we saw the photo of bamboos that were sorted, there were solid bamboos also. So we didn't know that where you used it. Right now, we came to know that you used it as the compression cords. And when we were discussing this with Hitesh sir, he was actually telling, he was actually trying to tell us the similar answer that we cannot take a risk in bamboo structures because there are no straightforward calculation, because each and every member is different in size, indifferent to each other. So that
yeah, so top chord is in compression, the bottom one is in tension.
yes.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Sankalp sir, good evening. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Sir, I am from FT and I'm a UG student right now in 4th year. So, in my studio experiences, I came to search material related to steel, materials that are steel, RCC and all. RCC mainly was a one touch, and steel was currently I'm doing it 3 times. But sir, always we get a dilemma in using steel, that whether to use steel in the point of the transparency which we could get in a structure, or to use it as a strengthening material to a structure. So I wanted to know your point of view in the use of steel to a structure of a big scale, like of 20 to 25 meter scale.
Well, see, there is no doubt steel is efficient. Okay, I don't think that there is a doubt. See, there has to be a collective decision between you as an engineer and an architect. Okay, as to what kind of material you want to. You can span with all kinds of material. Obviously, steel is the most elegant one because you get strength and all of with less amount of weight, etc. So, I mean, the thing is right now. In my frame of mind, there's a different agenda why I'm doing some of these things, or why I've been requesting our office also, and I think many of us are on the same page. Look, the role of university is to provide solutions, or a part role of the university, apart from imparting education, is to do, is to find breakthrough in the issues which the society is confronting. Now, currently, all of us know that we are confronting with the question of environment to a large extent. And as far as what I have been moving around in the country, I find young generations much more sensitive than I think what I see the other sort of. I mean, they are much more concerned because I at least have found that because they are directly experiencing it. So the question would be, will you go tomorrow? Will the university ask, or the R&D university will lead you to go into a dark cave age? I'm sure it won't. Okay. So what is the other way around? The other way around is to have a balance, and the balance will only happen when we are able to use material intelligently and efficiently. So the best friend of natural material is steel, because obviously it's an isotropic material. And most of the organic materials are anisotropic materials. So how will you give those materials strength in the other direction is by using steel. So which means that natural materials, if you are spanning in natural materials or whatever you're doing, if you add a little bit of steel, it just gives it an immense leap, which otherwise on its own natural materials are not sometimes capable of. So we are doing it because tomorrow we don't want to be said, or at least I personally in the university cannot be countered by saying that I was only interested in concrete. We are interested in diverse material, but university's job is to provide different solutions, out of which one of the solution is these. Let me put it that way. So that is why mixing of materials.
And sir, one more thing, that while using tensile structure, while resolving tensile structure in fundamentals, we see it always in tension forces. So is there any kind of other way to analyze any tensile structure or tensile material by fundamental, or it's the only way to judge it?
I didn't get it. Can you repeat again?
Yeah, sir. So in tensile structure, when we do certain iterations, we try to stretch this cloth material, and we try to resolve it using tension forces mostly. So because cloth is not feasible in compression, but
any material which is flexible,
yeah,
it performs when you stretch it. Okay.
Yes.
So that's the way I know it. But because I'm not a structure engineer, I will not leap into their domain to answer that question. So I think you should ask Anil Ben or somebody further to get clarity on that.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Sir, I had a question. When designing the roof with bamboo, it's obviously going to be intricate, and there are a lot of shapes and a lot of things going on. But the space below is about meditation and yoga, so which is about calming your mind. So did it ever occur in the design process that the roof will conflict with that idea of calmness in?
Well, I think it's a valid question. Okay. See, you can let's say work, or you can perform yoga outside under the tree, in the sky. Okay. You can also perform in the room of whatever sort of feel, and you can also perform in a building. Now, the question is that how much of architecture contributes to your own mental space or your own mental experience? And can we measure that? Because see, the thing is, how will you ensure that if it was flat, it is calm? There is no way to sort of, I don't see a way in which one can argue with that. Obviously, it's the most spontaneous question to think about it. But frankly, in our mind, we were pretty much clear about the fact that one, what is the other thing you will do? You will make a space truss, or you will make a compression member, and then you will cover it using a sheet so that you don't see the structure. And will you call that calm? I can cover it with something, we do false ceiling, etc. Will that be considered calm? So it's a very difficult question. I don't think that it's so easy to address the question of experience. And architecture can only facilitate that, but beyond the point, I don't think, and that's why I showed you particularly that animation of when you sort of bend down and when you lift up, what is the kind of space that you are seeing. But most of the time you are seeing it by closed eyes. You are not seeing by open eyes. Okay. So, it's sort of, it's a difficult question to sort of address it. But if you, I'm saying that if you want to think like that, I don't have problem with it. I think it's all right to think like that.
So that question arose when I saw the video of one moving upward. So that would immediately like catch attention if the eyes are open. Not about I was not thinking about the calm and all, but the amount of shapes that the ceiling creates and the amount of things that are happening, that would create a curiosity in the mind of a person who is doing yoga. Even if a person is standing or doing yoga or whatever, but that looking at the ceilings and the amount of things,
you can also think that it creates great pleasure when you are there. Okay, and then you start performing yoga. Yeah.
If there are not more questions, we can conclude the session.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you again, and hopefully we meet for the coming lectures of the series.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you.